from the cast and crew.
Oh.
I don't know which one's who, the Tyler in the car.
Yep, that's Anna's.
This is Anna's,
Thank you, Tom.
and this is Eric.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, I feel so appreciated. So lovely.
So before we take any questions, I thought that I might expand a little bit on the program notes about how this unique work came about. In 1974, Andre Previn asked Tom Stoppard if he could write something for a narrator and orchestra, thinking no doubt that they would do something along the lines of Peter and the Wolf or a Lincoln Portrait or many of these other works that require a narrator. And Stoppard responded with his idea, why don't we do something with actors and orchestra? And Previn didn't know what to make of that because nothing has ever been done with actors and orchestra before. So Stoppard began to try out different ideas. You know, the main problem is how do you incorporate an orchestra into a play? Because in a real sense, the play would have to be about an orchestra. So he finally came up with the idea of having the orchestra belonging to a millionaire. And he couldn't do anything further with it. He was stuck in that idea for a while until he thought, well, maybe it could just be a figment of the millionaire's imagination. Well, once it becomes just an illusion, of course, you don't need the millionaire. So he now had a lunatic in a mental asylum with an orchestra in his head. And still, he didn't know how to construct a play around that until he met a Soviet dissident by the name of Victor Feinberg, who provided the rest of the story, the idea of being in a Soviet mental asylum for your political beliefs. And so once he had the idea of the two ward mates sharing their cell, that he was able to go ahead with this drama. And as I said, this is really unique. There is no other play that incorporates an orchestra on stage. So we were really happy to be doing this for the second time. So we'll take questions now, please.
Or comments.
Yes. There are no quotations except, of course, for the Tchaikovsky 1812 Overture. But everything else, I think, is a very deft imitation, you're right, of Soviet music from the 30s and 40s, particularly Shostakovich and Prokofiev. And of course, Previn has made a career out of conducting that kind of repertoire, so he had it in his bones, and he did a great job with that. Yeah, good question. Thank you. I'll answer the first question. There is no recording, unfortunately. There should be a DVD. I wish there was, but there is not. And I'll let Anna answer the second one.
Actually, the National Theatre in London is doing a restaging of this play, Every Good Boy. Yeah, I think they opened in, well,
It's closed.
oh, it just closed?
Yeah.
We did, yeah. Yeah, I wish I could see it. Yeah. And I think that they have recorded it. Hopefully we'll have access to that. That would be fantastic. I'd love to see that production. There was no stage directions. There were none in the script as to what the actors might be doing in the 2 to 3 minutes musical interludes between dramatic action. So everything that you saw was my own invention. Yeah, and it was challenging as a director to know, what to do with my actors during those periods. I really considered just bringing the stage lights down and simply showing a series of images on the screen. And I toyed with that idea for a while, but the more I listened to this just gorgeous music, I started seeing my actors doing things in my head. So thankfully, I saw some stage business as an action, and that's what you saw tonight. Yeah. Stoppard again also did not request or ask for a screen with projection of images. Yeah, that was my first idea for what to do to cover the moments with no dramatic action, but then I found that I could really just continue the story without language, while also supporting the, what I hope is supporting the text with images as well. Yeah. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Yeah. My concept for the ending was that 30 years had passed since Alexander had been released from the mental institution. And that during that time, he tried his best to continue a normal life as anyone in his position really would. And he's meeting his son for lunch at Red Square. And he waves to him, he's on his way over when he's hit with a flashback from his time in the mental hospital. And it's very powerful, as flashbacks often are from people who've been through something like this, and he's sort of stuck in this. And Sasha turns and sees his father having this experience and runs to him and comforts him, telling him that everything can be all right. Yeah, so that was the idea, and again, just hit me, moment of inspiration, realized that, well, because I did want to, you know, acknowledge that 30 years or so have passed, you know, since the play was, from the period in which the play was set. But that, you know, much like Alexander, you know, the rest of us are still influenced and still are sort of inheritors of that period, you know, of Russian history in a sense. And that the idea that state power, oppressing the visual, that really has not gone away. It still cannot go away. It's always been with us and always will be with us. So I want to bring it back to the present for that reason too.
So we were fortunate that we had a DVD from when Redwood Symphony did the Northern California premiere 18 years ago. And Anna was able to use that just to get an idea of what the music is like and how things fit together. But there's so much that's left up in the air,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That you know aren't indicated in the play or in the score either.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to grope your way to find the solution to myriad problems.
Yeah, and thank you, Eric, you're exactly right. We also only had 3 days, three evenings of rehearsals with the orchestra. We rehearsed this play, yeah, it was intense. We rehearsed this play for 7 weeks. We opened on the 7th week. So we had plenty of time to investigate the character, the dramatic action, the metaphor, the meaning. You know, that was luxurious to have all that time to do that. But then it was crunch time in those last 3 rehearsals, yeah. And it was a real blessing to have that copy of the DVD from Eric's production 18 years ago. I honestly don't know what we would have done without that. We worked with the music consistently with my stage manager, who's brilliant, and my ASM, who's equally brilliant. We just ran it over and over again with those, you know, on the CD sound cues. And that helped enormously in knowing how this thing fit together. But again, as Eric was saying, there were some moments that were just not clear. There was some underscoring of the dialogue that I thought existed separately from the dialogue. But in fact, the music was happening underneath the dialogue. And so we had to, Eric and I, find a way to bring the orchestra to a level and my actors' voices to a level where you guys could, hopefully, hear them. So that was a bit challenging also. Yeah, but we made it work. It was an intense 3 days, but we pulled it together, yeah.
I also want to mention that the music really functions in 3 different ways. The first way, the obvious way, is that the orchestra is there and we are a mirage, a figment of a madman's imagination. But moreover, we function as scene-changing music and also as underscoring under dialogue as well. So we're not consistently a delusional orchestra. Sometimes we are. We could be a pit orchestra, but we just happen to be on stage as well.
Yes, yes. Well, certainly the way that Ivanov would see his orchestra would be as an orchestra, you know, impeccably dressed, of course, you know. On the other hand, though, yes, Ivanov is only mad in the sense that the characters on stage see him as such, and we, to a certain extent, see him as mad too. On the other hand, we see and hear the live orchestra, just as Ivanov does. So it really does raise the question of what is madness, what is reality, and what is unreality. You know, are the doctor and Sasha and the teacher, are they simply not in touch with the reality that you, the audience, are, and that Ivanov is, you know? So, yeah, so for me it raises interesting questions about the nature of sanity and of reality.
And to confuse things even more, of course, you've got the doctor in the orchestra at the beginning and then, you know, rising up and walking out of the orchestra. So that confuses things even further, right?
Yeah, true, true. Yeah, I love the ambiguity of this book, kind of what drew me to it. Yeah, it was enormously well received in London when it premiered. Good question. I imagine it all depends on whether or not you're a Stalinist. Some of those still existing and still demonstrating in Red Square to this day.
I wonder if they've even performed it in Russia yet. I don't know.
But they would have known about it, whether it was performed
Yeah.
or not. They would have had a reaction.
Yeah, and well, the theater scene in Moscow is much smaller than in many other, you know, European countries. So I don't know that it would have been picked up by a theater company in Moscow. It's worth looking into, certainly. Yeah. Yeah.
When you say that it was well received in London, do you mean that it had a long review? I mean, a long run and got rave reviews, or what do you mean by that?
I mean, there were a number of critics, two that I found in my research, who, in their review of the production, pointed out they thought the writing was really interesting and the piece was timely, and that it has some gravitas, some political power, as well as some creative and structural soundness. They did point out there were some flaws in the play as well. That Stopper provided no direction for the very ending of the play. The play just sort of seems to dissipate. I ran into that issue too as well when I was developing my ending for this piece. So but it sold well, and it ran for the expected amount of time. And
Say what orchestra?
it was a London Symphony Orchestra.
So it probably was not a long run because it was the London Symphony Orchestra, and they have other gigs to do, right? They probably only did,
I think it was a 6 to 8 week run. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
What?
That would surprise me.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think the London
I think I have to
Symphony
go back
would do
and read that review again. Yeah.
Did you say 6 to 8 weeks?
I thought it was a 6 to 8 week run.
That would surprise me
For
though,
that.
if it was that long.
Yeah, it would me too.
Well, we'll have to look it up. Yeah, sorry, it eludes me at the moment. All of the images were from my research on the internet, online. And I found various historical societies online that were amenable to me, taking their photos and throwing them up on the screen. What I was looking for was first of all, I wanted to contrast the propaganda posters, both from the Russian Revolution all the way through the 20s and 30s and 40s, with the reality of Stalinism. So that was one of my principal concerns in putting the slideshow together. Another was in hitting the highlights of the ensuing decades between the 70s and 2009. That was another consideration of mine as well. And I was also looking at things like form and color and shape, and think about which images I want to flash through the screen and which I want to hold for a moment or two. So yeah, those are my considerations when I put it together. I have to say that it was such a fascinating project for me. I was up till 2 in the morning on more than one occasion, just playing with the timing and digging for these really striking and powerful images. So yeah, that was my process. There were, as far as I could tell, I found one or two, I think it was 2, production photos from the world premiere. Of the 2 photos that I looked at, each one did have a projection on the back screen. It was one of Stalin's, a portrait of Stalin, only modified and distorted somewhat, repeated several times, across the cyc. But I don't know, honestly, if that was simply an image that was a still for the duration of an entire scene, or if the production, chose to also flash a series of images throughout the music. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. Thank you. It was a lot of fun to work with that. It's not a trend right now in American theater, which is kind of too bad. I have to say that I loved working with a live orchestra. It's so powerful. It was certainly a trend in European theater in the 19th century with melodrama. Often, they're trying to get around laws regarding who can perform a live theater, and so they called them musical productions, with dialogue. And so they skirted the law. But those were enormously popular until, I would say until the early 20th century. So I would love to see a resurgence of this kind of work, but I don't know. It poses some logistical and some financial challenges working with an orchestra, and it's tough. But I'd love to see more. I don't see it in development right now, though.
Well, I would love to see a play about orchestra intrigues, because as music director, you have no idea what I hear about the different myriad conflicts that go on between orchestra members, and it would make a great play to have sort of the backroom dealings that go on with an orchestra. So maybe someday someone will do something with that. I want to mention one more thing, which is the version you saw tonight is the chamber orchestra version of the original. The original, when we did it before, is for a full symphony of about 90 pieces. And we decided for various logistical and practical reasons to use a reduced orchestration that recently became available. We had, I think, 27 people in the orchestra this time around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, well, I think one of the messages of the play is certainly that the orchestra does exist, which is why it needs to be physically present on the stage. So following up on your comment about the intrigues within an orchestra, your job as the conductor is obviously to impose order, to make sure that everyone's on the same page in order to produce music. So would it be too much of a stretch to see you sort of as the Stalin figure in this play?
Well, I don't know if you heard that. Do
In
I
the
see
play or
myself?
off stage? I'm not sure which.
I think that well, a few comments. First of all, the days when conductor was a virtual dictator are pretty much gone now. I see myself more as a politician, as someone who finds conciliation between different parties and compromises, and even musically, I'm open to ideas from the musicians about how to interpret certain passages. But that's a very good point.
Which sounds a lot actually like what I do. You know, I think that the conductors and directors both are taking a more collaborative approach to their work.
Yeah. Oh,
in
and you know, conductors and directors do very similar functions, but I have to say that conductors have a great advantage over directors, and that is that we get to do the performance. And I'm sure it must kill you, Anna. Sometimes they have to sit in the back. And
Yeah, I have
watch
to
things.
white knuckle it
Yeah.
in the chair. Yeah, but my actors have not let me down in any of these productions. They've been fantastic.
Maybe someday actors will have little earpieces so you can whisper
Project.
instructions to them as they're going.
Stage left, stage left.
I don't know if that's true for all conductors, but there's always music in my head, virtually all the time. It can be a little annoying sometimes, and when people say I'm not listening to them, it's because I'm listening to something else. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of what we call earworms, you know, tunes you can't get out of your head that are there. But if you're implying, are there events in my life that I associate with particular pieces of music? No.
No, more along the lines of as you're going through a regular day, music playing to different things that happen.
It's more like whatever I'm working on currently with my orchestra, that it'll be running through my head. And I'm sure Anna has similar things that happen with her. I mean, we don't just work 9 to 5. It's a 24-hour-a-day process what we do.
Yeah, I mean, actors and directors both just will have these lines in our heads for, what do you think, actors, 3 or 4 more weeks from now? Probably until they finally fade away.
I remember shows from 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, once you get something that deeply in your unconsciousness, it sticks around and makes itself known on occasion, yeah. I'm still going to see this in my head for a while.
Question is, are they going to make an opera out of this? I would say no. I would say no. That would be interesting.
I don't know. I don't know actually what it would look like as an opera. It would distort it, I think, almost beyond recognition, really. It would almost be like a whole other, you know, performance or a whole other play as an opera.
Yeah. I think it would spoil it because an opera, as opposed to a musical, is sung straight through. And I think it's important that in this play that you keep that divide between the real world, which is spoken language, and the musical world.
Yeah.
Keep them separate.
And there's some beautiful subtleties too in the interaction and the dialogue that I think you would have to sacrifice, you know, in favor of sung opera. I think so. Yeah. Good question though. It's kind of a cool idea.
So in 1974, when I was a student at UCLA, I read the review in Time magazine of the premiere of this. 74, I think, whenever it came out.
Right.
77.
77. Okay, 1977.
Yeah.
So, and it was a great review, and I thought, what a great idea. Someday I'll have an orchestra and I will do this play. And so I just remembered it. And so as I mentioned earlier, we did the Northern California premiere 18 or so years ago. And it was fine, but there was only one performance, and we didn't have the use of the drama department. We found our own director who volunteered his services, and we had actors, and very minimal lighting and scenery. And so I just thought it would be fun to do it again, but this time to take advantage of the resources of the drama department. And as you can see, there's a lot of light cues and unique scenery and projections and all that stuff that makes this a really special production.
Yeah. And so when Eric, oh, sorry. Sorry. Claire, do you have the? I think Claire has some. Nope. Oh, wait. Hi. Okay. So when Eric handed me the script, I was a bit reluctant even to consider the possibility at first, just because I knew, even without looking at the script, it was going to be really challenging. But then I read the script, and then I realized I had to do it. What drew me to the script were several things. The first thing that hit me was how powerful it is politically. And I'm a director who's really drawn to dark, edgy political material. That's just who I am. That's what I really value. And that's a role I think theater can play beautifully, is to challenge all of us to look at things we don't necessarily want to see, and to think about things we don't necessarily want to think about. And I think this play really does that, where, for better or for worse, Americans right now are very concerned with the question of prisoners, those who are interred, either in Guantanamo or in this country. People we send to jail in our country are going through some really horrific experiences, much more than people who have never been to jail, I think, really realize. But certainly the question of people we pick up in the battlefield or in Iraq, what we do with them and what their treatment is like, is very much on our minds. And I thought the Alexander story of his torture was something, just that one monologue where he talks about what he went through, his injections and being wrapped up in the cloth that constricts him. I just felt like that had to get out there, and it raises a question, do we really want anyone to go through that? Do we feel it's necessary? Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but the debate, I think, needs to be sparked. So there was that. There was also just the beauty of the dialogue. There's so much humor, and inside this darkness that I thought was beautifully, and it's very intelligently written. So I just couldn't keep my hands off the dialogue as a director. I needed to get in there and help the actors discover the subtleties that I saw when I read it. So I guess that's what drew me to it. Thank you. Other questions or comments before we adjourn? Yeah.
I should do this individually, but have you looked at any of Václav Havel's work for edgy, meaningful, political?
The German writer from the
Havel, he was president of Czechoslovakia. He led the Velvet Revolution, and then he became president of Czechoslovakia.
Oh, of course, the '68 coup,
Yeah.
right, of course. He also wrote.
He was a playwright. That's his primary.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading about that, but I have not read any of his plays.
Oh, Mark, there's stuff. This is very reminiscent as a script of
his work.
similar stuff that Havel.
Well, obviously, I need to read
You should
some
look.
Havel.
You really should. You'd love it.
Thank you. I'll get on that now that I actually have some time.
It's been translated?
Oh yeah. I saw a production in LA. I took a Russian friend to see a production in LA of something similar themes, just spectacularly written. He's really, really good.
Well, thank you. It sounds like my kind of playwright. I think this has to be our last question because we need to start to take down the set. Yes.
Well, I just came back from New Zealand because my daughter is now living there, and she and her husband saw Tom Stoppard's Rock and Roll.
Oh, yes.
That last question.
Yeah,
It made me
project.
think of that.
Uh-huh.
And I think you guys did a fabulous job.
Oh, thank you.
But they enjoyed that, and I'm going to send her the program.
Oh my God, great, thank you.
Yeah. Go to
Fantastic.
New Zealand, they'd love it.
I would love to go to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Okay, well, unfortunately, it's all the time we have.